The Nile River spans almost 4,175 miles, crosses 9 countries throughout Africa, and is widely regarded as the longest river in the world. While all of this might be considered common knowledge, the winding waters of the famous river have many intriguing facts that you might not know. Here are 10 of the most fascinating facts about the Nile River. Without the Nile, the ancient Egyptian civilization may never have existed. The Nile River was considered the source of life by the ancient Egyptians and played a vital role in the country's history and rich culture. The river was also a very important factor in the socio-economic development and success of ancient Egypt. Without the River Nile, the great ancient civilization may never have existed, since rainfall was almost non-existent in Egypt and the Nile River was the only source of moisture to sustain crops. The real source of the Nile River remains unknown. Some might tell you that Lake Victoria, Africa's main lake, is the source of the River Nile. Others say that the Kagera River and its tributary, the Ruvubu, having its headwaters in Burundi, is the real source. The truth is, however, that the source of the River Nile remains a mystery to this day. The Nile Highway. The Nile Highway was the highway that joined the country together and was essential for trade and transportation. Up until the 19th century, travel by land was virtually unknown in the region. Ships and boats were the main means of transporting people and goods around the country. Nile, the life-giver. Other than providing water, the Nile offered an excellent soil for growing food, which is the main reason why so many Egyptians live near it. Locals used spears and nets to catch fish and trap different birds that flew close to the surface of the water. Contributing to the production of papyrus. So much of what we know about ancient Egypt comes from the plethora of written records left behind on papyrus. The Nile was responsible for providing this papyrus. It came from the reeds growing on the side of the river. The flooding of the Nile. Melting snow and heavy summer rain within the Ethiopian mountains sent a torrent of water, causing the banks and the River Nile in Egypt to overflow in this flat desert land, causing massive floods every year. The reason why it doesn't flow now is because of the construction of the Aswan High Dam in the 1960s. Akhet, the inundation. Until the Aswan High Dam was built, the early inundation of the Nile happened between June and September in a season the Egyptians called Akhet, the inundation. This was seen by Egyptians as a yearly coming of the deity Hapi, bringing fertility to the land. The goddess of the flood was the goddess Mehet-Weret, the Great Flood. Osiris, the Nile's most sacred god. Despite Hapi being the local deity in a way, the god most closely associated historically and culturally with the Nile was Osiris, who was killed by his brother Seth on the riverbank and then became the king of the underworld. For that reason, the Nile River was an important part of Egyptian spiritual life as well. The Egyptians believed that this was the passageway between life and death. That's why all Egyptian tombs are built on the west side of the Nile. The west was considered the place of death since the sun god Ra set in the west each day. A popular ancient sport was played on the Nile's waters. Ancient Egyptians practiced a popular river sport, water jousting. Modern knowledge of this sport comes from studying ancient tomb reliefs, thus it is limited. These depictions show that vessels held a small group of men, each one wielding a long pole. While most of the crew used theirs to maneuver the boat, a few of them would stand upright, wielding their poles to knock opponents off their respective boats. Crocodiles have been living in the Nile waters for thousands of years, and they don't really like it when humans get too close to them. They are known to attack humans regularly, usually people washing clothes or fishing at the shore. It's estimated that there are 200 attacks a year from Nile crocodiles in Africa. After a long period of speculation, a team of Polish archaeologists has discovered the functions of almost 100 monumental structures across the Middle Nile, which were built between the 4th and 6th centuries AD across an area of approximately 500 kilometers, from today's south of Egypt to central Sudan. The defensive structures served as refuges for the local population who could gather inside behind the safety of the high walls during times of unrest. According to PAP, the project led by Bogdan Zuraski, head of nubiology at the Institute of Mediterranean and Oriental Cultures, was subsidy granted by the Foundation for Polish Science to investigate the structures in the context of the formation of the Christian kingdoms in the valley of the Middle Nile. He said, "Archaeological landscape of Egypt is dominated by the pyramids, and Sudan by stone defensive structures from the time just before and just after the Christianization of pagan kingdoms in the mid-6th century. They are literally all over the whole valley of the Middle Nile." These defensive structures were built 20 to 30 kilometers apart, and between them observation towers were placed. According to the researchers, some of the ramparts were a few meters wide and a few meters high and were made of mud brick or stones, or sometimes a combination of both. The blocks were bonded with mud mortar and the walls covered an area of several hectares. In a few of the fortresses, the team of Egyptologists discovered traces of trebuchets, ballistic devices that toss stones at distances up to 100 meters. But as well as their military functions, the researchers found evidence that the monuments also had a refugial function. The lack of homes around the monuments also points to this. Regarding the discovery, he said, "The scale is unbelievable. After last research season, we are certain that the majority of the fortresses our team studied originally served as refuges, which means that in times of unrest, local people would find refuge behind the huge walls and wait out the danger." During the investigations, the middle interest of the researchers was a rectangular walled structure with a church and a well in the middle in Salib. For a long time, the function of this monument was unclear. The wall did not contain any corner towers and was quite thin compared to other walls from this period, so it didn't seem to have a defensive function. However, after a year of working there, researchers unearthed 16 bands of stone stairs leading to the top of the wall, which would have allowed quick access to the top of the wall to take defensive action, confirming that this monument was indeed used for defense.
When we talk about pyramids, the best known and the first to come to mind are those of Giza and those of Mexico, but there are many other pyramids in Egypt, not to mention those in South America. There are also allegedly examples in Romania and Bosnia-Herzegovina, North America, China, Korea and Italy, though the evidence for the latter group is thin to say the least. One of the latest pyramids discovered is the apparently colossal pyramid in Romania, which would have to be, according to some alternative historians and researchers, more than 15,000 years old. For archaeologists and most researchers, it is merely a natural hill, but for some this confirms that in the remote past there were several pre-Diluvian civilizations that were responsible for creating these pyramids all over the world. The fact that the various pyramids scattered all over the world vary massively in date from prehistoric to medieval does not seem to bother these researchers. Apparently these ancient civilizations had the power and knowledge to travel between continents and thus were able, for a reason we still don't know, to build pyramids that were very similar. Usually the pyramids share a similar structure and were created as places of extreme importance to the daily life of the community, possibly ceremonial centers dedicated to the gods. Although we know of those pyramids that were built a few hundred, sometimes thousands of years ago, in recent years the evidence has been accumulating in regard to antediluvian civilizations, that is, civilizations that prospered before the last glaciation. This glaciation and the subsequent deluge occurred about 14,000 years ago. According to a few researchers, and apparently, these people lost in time would have been pyramid builders. The existence of these forgotten ancestors resides in ancient documents, such as the List of the Sumerian Kings and in the timeline of the Egyptian pharaohs that governed until the moment the gods descended to the earth. For some, the most recent evidence of antediluvian civilizations would be the Bosnian pyramids, discovered in 2005 by Sam Osmanagic. These constructions above the village of Visoko have been dated by him to between 12,500 and 30,000 years. Osmanagic calls one the Pyramid of the Moon and claims it is the world's largest and oldest step pyramid. At the opposite side of town is the so-called Pyramid of the Sun, which, at 720 feet, dwarfs the Great Pyramids of Egypt. A third pyramid, he says, is in the nearby hills. All of them, he says, are at least 12,000 years old, despite the fact that during that time most of Europe was under a mile-thick sheet of ice, and most of humanity had yet to invent agriculture. As a group, Osmanagic says these structures are part of the greatest pyramidal complex ever built on the face of the earth. But archaeologists remain unmoved. The landform Osmanagic is calling a pyramid is actually quite common, agrees Paul Heinrich, an archaeological geologist at Louisiana State University. They're called flatirons in the United States, and you see a lot of them out west. He adds that there are hundreds around the world, including the Russian twin pyramids in Vladivostok. There is another interesting mound in the Carpathian Mountains, 1,000 meters above sea level, that has captured the imagination of some alternative history enthusiasts. This pyramid has a height of 300 meters. The Pyramid of Cheops in Giza is 150 meters high, and the Pyramid of Bosnia about 220 meters. So the pyramid discovered in Romania would be more similar to that of Cheops, and would be about 80 meters more than the Pyramid of Bosnia. Some researchers who climbed to the top of the mountain found remnants of ancient stone walls consisting of 3 layers of overlapping stone, fixed together with clay, which is a material that provides extensive protection against rainwater, and is also an excellent material with which to join stones together. Probably the most fascinating aspect of the fortification was the thick reddish-brown layer of material composed of mineral oxides that covered the outer wall of the pyramid. Based on the kind of plaster that covers up even the cracks between the stones, researchers were able to date the structure using a technique known as dowsing, which resulted in the stones apparently dating back to between 22,000 and 25,000 years old. Further proof of an advanced ancient culture in Romania that was able to construct huge pyramids are the clay tablets that were unearthed in Tătăria, Transylvania, bearing inscriptions belonging to the Vinca culture, who possessed a writing system which according to some predates that of the Sumerians. The inscribed clay tablets were found in a Neolithic context at Tătăria in Romania in 1961. The signs on the tablets are comparable with those of the script of the late pre-dynastic period in Mesopotamia. It seems unlikely, however, that the tablets were drafted by a Sumerian hand or in the Sumerian language of early Mesopotamia. The shapes of the tablets and some of the signs are paralleled in the Minoan scripts of Crete, but the tablets do not seem to be Cretan. There are indications that a similar use of signs, if not actual writing, was practiced in the rest of the Aegean and in the western Anatolia before the end of the 3rd millennium BC. A knowledge of writing or the use of signs derived from it may have spread to these regions and to the Balkans from Mesopotamia through Syria. This was perhaps one aspect of a common inheritance of religious or magical beliefs and practices. However, the authenticity of the engravings has been disputed from the beginning. A recent claim of forgery is based on the similarity between some of the symbols and reproductions of Sumerian symbols in popular Romanian literature available at the time of discovery. Some researchers have connected this strange Romanian text with what was allegedly found in the cave of the Taos, Ecuador. In 1976, a major expedition entered the cave in search of artificial tunnels, lost gold, strange sculptures, and a metallic library supposedly left by a lost civilization aided by extraterrestrials. Among this group was the astronaut Neil Armstrong. The indigenous Shuar people of Ecuador have been entering the vast cave system on the jungle-covered eastern foothills of the Andes for centuries. They descend using ladders made of vines through one of 3 dangerous entrances, the largest of which is a 213-foot deep shaft that leads into a network of tunnels and chambers stretching for at least 2.85 miles. For the Shuar, these caves have always been a centre for spiritual and ceremonial practices, home to powerful spirits as well as tarantulas, scorpions, spiders and rainbow boas. As guardians of the cave system, the Shuar have been left in relative peace over the last century or two. However, in 1971, Erich von Daniken's The Gold of the Gods was published, and in it he told the obscure story of one Janos van Moritz, an explorer who claimed to have entered the caves in 1969. Inside the cave, he said, he had discovered a treasure trove of gold, strange artifacts and sculptures, and a metallic library containing lost texts preserved on metal tablets. And the caves themselves were definitely man-made, he claimed, created by some advanced intelligence now lost to history. Back to the pyramids. According to some researchers and authors, some pyramids could be connected by underground tunnels that stretch for thousands of miles. This has apparently been proven by the use of probes, which send electromagnetic impulses through the Earth, and have found extensive cavities that are hundreds of thousands of miles long. But the main problem with this theory of a single ancient global super race building the pyramids is that it does a great disservice to our ancestors. Some supporters of the theory, such as Erich von Daniken and Zecharia Sitchin, claim that the ancient Egyptians were too backward to have constructed the pyramids without the help of extraterrestrials. However, it is undeniable that with so many ancient enigmas only now being brought to light, it should not surprising that future archaeological advances and discoveries will force us to rethink at least some aspects of what we know of the history of mankind. But it should be the study of real, not imagined ancient monuments like pyramids that will help us in these endeavours.
A new study at Utrecht University in the Netherlands has shed new light on one of the Earth's biggest lost continents. The study, led by geologist Delb van Hinsbergen, explores the mysteries of what is known as Greater Adria. In a paper published in September 2019 in the Gondwana Research Journal, Hinsbergen and his colleagues examined rocks beneath the Mediterranean Sea to reveal the full extent of the Greater Adria for the first time. It's enormous, about the size and rough shape of Greenland, Hinsbergen told the press. Greater Adria was completely buried around 140 million years ago, not beneath the ocean, but beneath southern Europe. Its surrounding continents collided, and Greater Adria got bulldozed and buried in the process, sinking beneath what is now Italy, Greece, and the Baltics. But Greater Adria is not unique. Cutting-edge studies of Earth's mantle are now revealing more traces of lost continents. Analysis of ancient rocks suggests that much of all the Earth's earliest continents might have been lost to the ravages of time, and with them, much of the history of life on planet Earth. Myths of lost kingdoms have persisted since the dawn of Western civilization. In the 4th century BC, Plato first introduced the concept of Atlantis, which he described as an island continent larger than northern Africa and Asia Minor combined, ruled by 10 powerful kings who were the direct descendants of Atlas, son of the god Poseidon, and for whom Atlantis was named. The inhabitants of this faraway land was said to be blessed with untold riches that were paralleled only by their supreme knowledge, attained through their virtuous observance of the rules of the gods. But as generations passed, the Atlanteans grew greedy and materialistic, forsaking the spiritual laws of their founding fathers. They became bent on conquering the wider world. Eventually, the Atlanteans were defeated, and the gods punished them by destroying their land in its entirety, sinking it to the bottom of the sea in the lapse of a single day and night, 9,200 years before Plato's birth. Opinions have differed over the centuries as to whether Plato invented Atlantis as an allegory for the ideal society, or if indeed such a lost continent really did exist and was lost to the ravages of time. Over the years, countless adventurers have attempted to pinpoint the location of Atlantis by trying to interpret Plato's meticulous descriptions of its geography, ceremonies, rituals, customs, and architecture. Atlantis has been traced to a long list of sites around the world, from the Atlas Mountains in North Africa to the Canary Islands, from the Azores in Portugal to Cadiz in Spain, all the way to the Bahamas and even the Altiplano. Over time, the population perception of Atlantis changed from a mythic kingdom cursed by the wickedness of human nature as portrayed in the original texts of Plato to the birth of civilization itself. In 1881, former American politician Ignatius Loyola Donnelly wrote the book Atlantis, the Antediluvian World, in which he posited that all the civilizations of the ancient past shared one single origin. He supported his theory with evidence in the commonalities of language, architecture, and religions shared by seemingly independent cultures scattered all across the globe. Although criticized by skeptical academics, Donnelly's book sold thousands of copies and ignited the popular imagination for years to come. Atlantis isn't the only lost civilization to have captured the Western imagination. Charles Darwin's theories of evolution led some scientists to suggest that, since lemurs are abundant in the island of Madagascar and are also found in India and southern Africa, there had to have been a giant land bridge connecting these two areas long ago. English geologist Philip Skatler called this lost land Lemuria, which was posited by several scientists at the time to be the cradle of humanity. And even though modern geology long ago discarded the Lemuria hypothesis in favor of the theory of continental drift, 19th century occultist Helena Blavatsky appropriated Lemuria for her 1888 book The Secret Doctrine, which was said to be the real history of man revealed to her by ascended masters living in Tibet and the Far East. According to Blavatsky's spiritual sources, the Lemurians lived on a continent that occupied most of the southern hemisphere. They were hermaphrodite and able to communicate telepathically by way of their third eye. As Lemuria sank beneath the sea millions of years ago, their descendants, the Atlanteans, inhabited a portion of Lemuria in the northern Atlantic that also ended up sinking some 9,000 years ago. Blavatsky believed the descendants of that catastrophe escaped to Central Asia, where they evolved into modern Hindus and Indo-Iranians. Even today, belief in the Lemurians is alive and well in New Age communities surrounding Mount Shasta in Northern California. And also thanks to magazine editor Ray Palmer, in 1945, Palmer received the seemingly deranged text of a man named Richard Shaver, who claimed to have been trapped inside the underground dwellings of sinister beings called the Diros. After making major adjustments to the text, Palmer published the story in Amazing Stories, which boosted sales of the magazine to stratospheric levels. The New Age didn't forget Atlantis either, thanks to Edgar Cayce, the famous sleeping prophet and medical clairvoyant who in the 1930s started to receive information about Plato's lost continent during his trance-like states. According to Cayce, the Atlanteans had developed a highly advanced civilization that was at least technologically on par, if not superior, to the industrialized world of the 20th century. Cayce died in 1945, but not before predicting that by the late 1960s, the western region of Atlantis will begin to reappear near the Caribbean island of Bimini. In 1968, scuba divers happened to find in the waters just off Bimini what seemed to be a long roadway paved with regular blocks of stone. Subsequent radiocarbon dating of the monumental blocks indicated an age of some 12,000 years. But orthodox scientists have always been quick to dismiss and downplay such findings, just like the provocative submarine formations of Yonaguni, founded in 1987 by a diver off the coast of Okinawa. The Bimini roadway was explained as natural formations that only have the appearance of being man-made. Amid this skeptical environment landed Fingerprints of the Gods, the seminal 1995 book by author Graham Hancock. Picking up from where Ignatius Loyola Donnelly left off, Hancock has continued to make the argument in favor of a primordial civilization that influenced the construction of megalithic structures and archaeological landmarks by highlighting their geographical alignment to notable celestial features, which point to a catastrophic event having occurred around the edge of the Younger Dryas Ice Age some 12,000 years ago. Critics like Egyptologist Zahi Hawass have viciously attacked Hancock and accused him of being a pseudo-scientist. But unlike Donnelly 140 years ago, it looks like this time Hancock might get the last laugh. The discovery of elevated concentrations of iridium and magnetic spheres coinciding with the Younger Dryas strongly suggest that one or more cometary impacts could have drastically and rapidly altered our planet's climate, reshaping the Earth's ironography and the ocean levels in ways which would have been devastating for any advanced civilization. The discovery of Gobekli Tepe in southeastern Anatolia in the late 90s is further strong evidence of the high levels of cultural sophistication achieved around a time when orthodox archaeology assumed our ancestors were living as simpler hunter-gatherer nomads instead of building astronomically aligned megalithic structures using rocks that weigh 8 to 10 metric tons each. The number of so-called natural formations found under the oceans is increasing. In 2014, a fisherman managed to detect what seemed like a huge underwater construction between islands in the Azores. The pyramidal structure was said to have a base of 8,000 square meters and was reported to the Portuguese Hydrographic Institute. Unfortunately, no further updates on this potentially groundbreaking discovery are available, and the only websites that carry the story are popular news outlets devoted to ancient mysteries. Reputable websites like National Geographic may squirm when dealing with unconfirmed news of sunken pyramids near the Azores or off the western coast of Cuba. But they have no problem writing about Doggerland, a landmass now submerged between the North Sea, which used to connect mainland Europe and the eastern coast of Great Britain. Scientists know that Mesolithic hunter-gatherers used to inhabit this sunken land until they were forced to migrate onto higher ground around 6,000 years ago, when the ice sheets that used to cover most of the northern hemisphere began to melt. Stop staring at your screen for a second and take a look at everything around you. The tables and chairs of the cafe you're sitting at, the bookcases and paintings in your living room, your video game console and your TV in your bedroom, or the computers and file cabinets around your cubicle. We tend to forget just how fragile all of these gadgets really are until we're brusquely reminded of it by a natural disaster. And yet, the many volcanic eruptions, earthquakes and hurricanes we have watched on the news don't compare to the irreversible damage that one single cometary impact would inflict on our technically dependent civilization. How long would we last without electricity, running water or gasoline? How much of our mighty civilization would endure after rising sea levels reshape the features of our planet once again? Graham Hancock's favorite saying goes, "Ours is a species with amnesia." Perhaps the myth of Atlantis has lingered in our minds for so long, it's because it represents the ultimate cautionary tale that, no matter how smart or powerful we think we are, no matter how proud of our achievements and discoveries we feel, and how far we think we've advanced in comparison to our primitive ancestors, it is nothing compared to the humbling might of Mother Nature. We are living in a pivotal time in the history for our species, and if we don't make the right choices while there is still time, we risk becoming the new Atlantis of our future descendants. Harappan or Indus Valley civilization, which flourished across what is now Pakistan and northwest India from about 3000 BC, but was abandoned in 1800 BC, according to some due to a terrible atomic war. The Indus Valley was thought to be the earliest civilization in the area, but over recent years, discoveries have been made which indicate the existence of a civilization on the Arabian Sea coast of India as far back as 8,000 to 10,000 years ago. Some fringe researchers even believe that pre-Ice Age structures and artifacts from a lost civilization await discovery on the seabed in the area. The remains of one of the world's first great cities, Mohenjo-Daro, lie on the bank of the Indus River in the Sindh province of southern Pakistan. It was one of the major urban centers of the Indus Valley civilization, which originated about 3300 BC in the Indus and Ganga-Hakra river valleys in what is now Pakistan and western India. Around 1,000 towns and settlement sites of the Indus civilization have so far been discovered, with the main sites being the cities of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, located 400 miles north of Mohenjo-Daro, and the coastal site of Lothal. Traces of the Indus civilization have been discovered as far north as the Himalayas and northern Afghanistan, and as far south as Mumbai, Bombay. During its peak period between 2600 and 1900 BC, it has been estimated that the Indus civilization may have had a population of as much as 5 million. Located on the lower Indus, surrounded by a fertile floodplain, Mohenjo-Daro must have been an extremely prosperous city, controlling the trade routes based on the river network. Signs of change at Mohenjo-Daro began to appear in the material culture of the city after 1900 BC, and within 100 years, Mohenjo-Daro was abandoned as the Indus Valley civilization declined. Some bizarre claims have been made surrounding the supposed destruction of Mohenjo-Daro. Without doubt, the most extreme theory is that it and other cities of the Indus civilization were destroyed by ancient atomic warfare. Cited as evidence for this are facts from the skeletons found at the ancient city were highly radioactive, comparable with those from Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and that many of these skeletons were sprawled in the street, some holding hands, as if some instant horrible doom had taken place. The supposed discovery of a heavy layer of radioactive ash in Rajasthan, India, which covers a 3 square mile area, is also given in the support of the claims of ancient atomic warfare. In his 1970 book, Gods from Outer Space, Eric von Daniken says that the old Indian and Tibetan texts in particular teem with science fiction weapons. I am thinking of the divine lightning and ray weapons, and of the texts that seem to be referring to bacteriological weapons. Another source which probably added to the myth is the Vaimanika Shastra, Science of Aeronautics, which first appeared in English in 1973, translated by G.R. Joshier. This supposedly ancient Sanskrit text discusses the construction of vimanas, mythical self-propelled aerial vehicles described in the Sanskrit epics. Recent research into this text has, however, shown that the manuscript was actually written sometime between 1918 and 1922. Though, this has not prevented it having a significant influence on proponents of the theory that vimanas were real ancient flying machines, probably used for ancient aerial warfare. From here it is but a short step to ancient nuclear destruction. Many of the structures at Mohenjo-Daro were constructed of fired bricks, and it is partly for this reason that the site is one of the best preserved ancient cities in the world. In fact, the walls of some of the structures still stand 10 feet or more high, pretty impressive after a nuclear destruction. For decades, archaeologists have argued about the origins of the Indus Valley civilization. In 2001, new findings by Indian scientists from the National Institute of Ocean Technology working in the Gulf of Cambay suggest that the Harappans were descended from an advanced mother culture that flourished at the end of the last ice age, that was then submerged by rising sea levels before history began. In 2001, the remains of a huge lost city were located 118 feet underwater in the Gulf of Cambay off the western coast of India. A year later, further acoustic imaging surveys were undertaken and evidence recorded for human settlement at the site, which included the foundations of huge structures, pottery, sections of walls, beads, pieces of sculpture, and human bone. One of the wooden finds from the city has given a radiocarbon date of 7500 BC, which would make the site 4000 earlier than the oldest known civilization in India. Research is ongoing at this fascinating site, which, if the dates are proved correct, may one day radically alter our understanding of the world's first civilizations. Researcher Graham Hancock, author of the 2002 book Underworld: Flooded Kingdoms of the Ice Age, believes such discoveries vindicate his long-held beliefs about the existence of highly advanced civilizations throughout the world in prehistoric times and their obliteration from the historical record by a huge catastrophe over 10,000 years ago. Hancock commented on how the discoveries in the Gulf of Cambay fitted in nicely with his theories. In India, new evidence from the bottom of the sea is showing substance to the myth. This in the Gulf of Cambay in northwest India. In late 2001, scientists conducting pollution studies made an astonishing accidental discovery. 25 miles from shore, at a depth of 120 feet, they picked up traces of an ancient city covering a large area of the seabed. The discovery threatened to overturn everything that archaeologists believed about the origins of civilization. They found a city the size of Manhattan with massive walls and plazas, and man-made objects from the submerged cities have yielded carbon dates up to 9,500 years old. That's 5,000 years older than any city discovered by archaeologists anywhere. It means we are dealing with a civilization lost at the end of the Ice Age, perhaps even one of those that the flood myths speak of, which flourished before history began. The conclusion drawn by the geologists who found the site was that the remains constituted a prehistoric civilization that was the forerunner and model to the subsequent advanced Harappan civilization known to history. They believed that the prehistoric metropolis of Cambay was in existence from about 13,000 BC to around 3000 BC, making it the most ancient and largest city civilization not only in Asia but also the entire world. For them, it's at least 7,500 years older than the oldest Mesopotamian city civilization. A certain Dr. Badrinyaran, chief geologist of the team, also put forward the rather extreme unscientific theory that strong evidence supports the presence of humans from at least 31,000 BP, who were evolving and developing and formed a great hitherto unknown civilization that was submerged by the flood, giving credence to local and global flood myths. There has been considerable controversy over these discoveries and their dating. Critics noted that the team who found the ancient remains were geologists and not archaeologists, and therefore had no experience with investigating archaeological sites and dating archaeological material. The single early date of 7595 BC obtained from the remains comes from one single C14 dating. Normally, several C14 dates have to be obtained from objects from the same context to be certain of the date. Claims of the existence of these submerged city-like structures have also been disputed, with some archaeologists maintaining they are natural, not man-made. The same is true of the stone artifacts recovered from the site, which many researchers believe are merely natural stones or rocks. The pottery recovered, for example, is merely drenched-up casts of tube-worm tunnels from the ocean floor. At the University of Pennsylvania in the US, archaeologist Gregory Possell, who has excavated a number of Harappan sites in India, points out that there is no scientific reason to believe that the fossilized wood piece was dated back to 7500 BC and is linked to the ruins in the seabed. Taking into account the strong tidal movement in the area, it could easily have been swept from elsewhere. Other archaeologists don't think it possible that organic matter would have survived for thousands of years in the ocean, thus making it extremely unlikely that finds from the site would contain anything that could be carbon dated. Despite the claims of Hancock and the National Institute of Ocean Technology, nothing has been published from the site since its discovery in 2001. Neither have the artifacts from the site been made available to outside investigation. In fact, nothing at all has been heard of these supposedly amazing discoveries in the Gulf of Cambay for at least 10 years. Taking all of this into account, it does indeed seem that the story of a 9,000-year-old sunken city is just another wild claim made by dubious researchers and completely rejected by the legitimate archaeological community. The term Anua or Anunnaki indicates a group of gods in the Mesopotamian pantheon dating back thousands of years. For some researchers, the Anunnaki were much more than myth. They were real pre-human beings who constructed many of the ancient sites in the world. A number of these ancient sites, such as Gobekli Tepe in Turkey, are thought by some to be gateways to other worlds and parallel universes which can only be accessed by those who know. The Anunnaki. Sumer was an ancient civilization located in the Mesopotamia region of the Fertile Crescent, situated between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. This region is known today as the Middle East, but in antiquity, Mesopotamia also included parts of Southwest Asia and land around the eastern Mediterranean Sea. Sumer was first settled by people from 4500 to 4000 BC, though it is possible and indeed likely that some settlers arrived much earlier. The Sumerian language is the oldest written language in existence and is first attested about 3100 BC in southern Mesopotamia. In ancient Sumerian texts, Anuna, Akkadian, Anunnaki, describes the highest gods in the Mesopotamian pantheon, but confusingly, it can also be used to design the pantheon of a particular city or city-state, such as the Anua of Eridu, for example. One of the main duties of the Anunnaki was to decide the fates, as can be seen in the Sumerian myth Enki and the world order. Enki, the king of the Abzu, justly praises himself in his majesty. My father, the king of heaven and earth, made me famous in heaven and earth. My elder brother, the king of all the lands, gathered up all the divine powers and placed them in my hand. I brought the arts and crafts from the Ekur, the house of Enlil, to my Abzu in Eridu. I am the good seaman, begotten by a wild bull. I am firstborn of An. I am a great storm rising over the great earth. I am the great lord of the land. I am the principal among all rulers, the father of all foreign lands. I am the big brother of the gods. I bring prosperity to perfection. I am the seal keeper of heaven and earth. I am the wisdom and understanding of all the foreign lands. With An the king on An's dais, I oversee justice. With Enlil looking out over the lands, I decree good destinies. He has placed in my hands the decreeing of fates in this place where the sun rises. I am cherished by Nintud. I am named with a good name by Nin Husaija. I am the leader of the Anuna gods. I was firstborn, son of holy An. Although they are usually attested in literary and mythological texts, the Anunnaki are sometimes invoked in curse formulas and also appear in incantations. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, an epic poem from ancient Mesopotamia and the second oldest religious text after the pyramid texts, the phrase "Judge of the Anunnaki" is mentioned as the title of Gilgamesh. This could be reference to Gilgamesh's function as a judge in the underworld. Zecharia Sitchin. According to author Zecharia Sitchin, whose theories were compiled into his 7 books known as the Earth Chronicles, there is a 12th planet beyond Neptune known as Nibiru that reaches our inner solar system once every 3,600 years. Sitchin believes that an advanced race of human-like extraterrestrials, which he calls the Anunnaki, live on Nibiru and are no less than the missing link in Homo sapiens evolution. The blurb for Sitchin's 2015 book, The Anunnaki Chronicles, a Zecharia Sitchin reader states, "What if the tales from the Old Testament and other ancient writings, such as those from Sumer, Babylon, Egypt, and Greece, were not myths or allegory, but accounts of actual historical events? Drawing both widespread interest and criticism, Sitchin's Earth Chronicles series of books, beginning with the 12th planet, detailed how humanity arose after the arrival of the Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came, alien gods who created modern man in their own image and imparted gifts of civilizing knowledge. If his theories are true, as Sitchin wholeheartedly believed, then this collection presents some of the most important knowledge we have of our origins and future. Other researchers such as Michael Cremo and Eric von Daniken have argued along with Sitchin that the Anunnaki were aliens posing as gods who genetically engineered the human race, a slave species. What the evidence is for this extreme theory, however, has never been put forward. Gobekli Tepe. Located 6 miles from the ancient city of Urva in the southeastern Anatolia region of Turkey, Gobekli Tepe is considered to be one of the most important archaeological sites in the world. The discovery of this stunning 10,000-year-old site in the 1990s sent shockwaves through the archaeological world and beyond, with some researchers even claiming it as the site of the biblical Garden of Eden. The many examples of sculptures and megalithic architecture that make up what is the world's earliest temple at the site predate pottery, metallurgy, the invention of writing and the wheel, and the beginning of agriculture. That hunter-gatherer peoples could organize the construction of such a complex site as far back as 10 or 11,000 years ago not only revolutionizes our understanding of hunter-gatherer culture, but also poses serious challenges to the orthodox view of the rise of civilization. There have been one or two alternative suggestions which question the conventional timeline of Gobekli Tepe, however. A summary of British author Andrew Collins' 2014 book, Gobekli Tepe, Genesis of the Gods, the Temple of the Watchers and the Discovery of Eden, on the publisher's website makes some astonishing claims. Collins explores how Gobekli Tepe was built as a reaction to a global cataclysm, the Great Flood in the Bible, and explains how it served as a gateway and map to the sky world, the place of first creation, reached via a bright star in the constellation of Cygnus. He reveals those behind its construction as the Watchers of the Book of Enoch and the Anunnaki gods of Sumerian tradition. Unveiling Gobekli Tepe's foundational role in the rise of civilization, Collins shows how it's connected to humanity's creation of the Garden of Eden and secrets Adam passed to his son Seth, the founder of an angelic race called the Sethites. In his search for Adam's legendary cave of treasures, the author discovers the Garden of Eden and the remains of the Tree of Life, in the same sacred region where Gobekli Tepe is being uncovered today. Ancient sites as gateways to other worlds. But Collins is not alone in claiming that ancient sites like Gobekli Tepe acted as gateways to other dimensions. The Hell or Hades of the ancient classical world was supposedly located at the Cape Matapan caves on the southernmost tip of the Greek mainland. Cape Matapan, also known as Cape Teneron or Tenero, was the place where Orpheus traveled down to Hades to rescue Eurydice, and where Hercules made his own descent to the underworld and brought Cerberus, the multi-headed dog that guards the gates of the underworld, to the surface. A mysterious chasm known as Lacus Curtius, located in the heart of the ancient Roman Forum, was also believed to be a gateway to hell. The name indicates that it was a lake, and archaeologists believe that in ancient times there was a lake on the site of the later Roman Forum. There are various stories of ritual sacrifice and offerings surrounding the site. It was once believed that at the beginning of a new reign, a chasm would suddenly open in the middle of the Forum Valley, which could be closed, according to priests, by human sacrifice. Pluto's Gate, or Plutonian in Greek, is located at the World Heritage Site of Hierapolis in southwestern Turkey, which was discovered as recently as 2013 when archaeologists followed the route of a thermal spring. The remains, which the archaeologists recovered, matched closely with ancient descriptions of the temple to the underworld on the site that disappeared mysteriously in the 6th century AD. The Greek geographer, philosopher, and traveller Strabo, who lived from 64 BC to 24 AD, described the site when he visited. This space is full of vapour so misty and dense that one can scarcely see the ground. Any animals that pass inside meets an instant death. I threw in sparrows, and they immediately breathed their last and fell. Among other artifacts at the site, the archaeologists discovered an inscription with a dedication to the deities of the underworld, Pluto and Kor. They also found the remains of a temple, a pool, and a series of steps built above the cave, all fitting the descriptions of the site in ancient sources. There are numerous other myths describing such entrance places to the underworld all over the world. Could these ancient sites have somehow retained in myth form their function as gateways to other realms? The 13th century BC witnessed the zenith of many Aegean and Eastern Mediterranean civilizations, such as the Mycenaeans in Greece and the Hittites of what is now Turkey and Syria. However, these civilizations declined and disappeared at the end of the Bronze Age around 3,000 years ago. For many, this collapse was caused by the mysterious Sea Peoples. The only contemporary source for these Sea Peoples are inscriptions describing two Egyptian military campaigns. The first of these campaigns was by the Minotaur, who ruled from 1213 to 1203 BC against the Libyans, who, with the help of northerners coming from all lands, also referred to as peoples of the countries of the sea, were attempting to move into the western delta. 3 or 4 decades later, Pharaoh Ramesses III, who reigned from around 1186 to 1155 BC, fought against another wave of these invaders moving south from Syria. Ramesses commemorated the campaign on his mortuary temple at Medinet Habu on the west bank of the Nile, opposite Luxor, where he referred to his antagonists as invaders from the foreign countries. The inscriptions at Medinet Habu date to the year of Ramesses III's reign, at about 1190 BC. The texts are extremely significant as they provide an account of Egypt's campaign against these invaders from an Egyptian point of view, and the artistic depictions of the Sea Peoples give important information about the appearance of weapons of the various groups. One inscription from the site states, "Now the northern countries, which were in their isles, were quivering in their bodies. They penetrated the channels of the Nile's mouths. Their nostrils have ceased to function, so that their desire to breathe the breath. His Majesty has gone forth like a whirlwind against them, fighting on the battlefield like a runner. The dread of him and the terror of him have entered into their bodies. They are capsized and overwhelmed in their places. Their hearts are taken away, their soul is flown away, their weapons are scattered by the sea." The Phoenicians are known today for their development of the alphabet, their cedar-built ships, fine purple cloth, and their trading cities in Lebanon, Carthage, and Tyre. The Phoenician culture emerged around 1550 BC in a narrow coastal strip of land which is now Lebanon, Syria, and parts of Israel, and became the great maritime traders of the ancient world. By 700 BC, they had expanded to dominate the Mediterranean area, establishing emporiums and colonies from Cyprus in the east to the Aegean Sea, Italy, the coast of north of Africa, and the Atlantic coast of Spain in the west. However, invasions of their homeland by the Persians in 539 BC and Alexander the Great 200 years later sent their civilization into decline. The Phoenician civilization was organized in city-states which generally occupied strategically important sites along the Mediterranean coast and soon became important trading centers, establishing trade networks with Egypt, the Hittite Empire, and Babylonia. Many of these cities, Byblos, Tyre, and Sidon, had been Canaanite settlements, and there is no reason to believe there was any cultural break between the Canaanites and Phoenicians in the area. However, around 1200 BC, an unknown event occurred in the region which caused a general collapse. This is historically connected with an invasion from the north by a group known as the Sea Peoples. Mycenaean Greece, circa 1600 BC to 1100 BC, consisted of a series of independent city-states centered on palaces, and the most important of which was Mycenae in the northeastern Peloponnese, the home of the semi-legendary Agamemnon, one of the leaders of the Greek army which defeated Troy. Each Mycenaean city was autonomous, ruled by a king, and protected by considerable fortifications. At their height, the Mycenaeans controlled all of Greece and the Aegean from the separate city-states. The Sea Peoples are believed by some to have caused the downfall of the Mycenaean civilizations at the end of the Bronze Age, during which all Mycenaean palaces, except those on the Acropolis of Athens, were destroyed. Although human agency was certainly involved, as many of the palaces were burnt to the ground, whether the Sea Peoples were responsible for all of this or just part of a more widespread unrest is not clear. Some researchers have suggested that the Mycenaeans later formed all or part of the Sea Peoples, perhaps together with groups of Phoenicians becoming essentially pirates roaming the eastern Mediterranean. Whoever these people were and whatever happened around 1200 BC, the power of the Egyptians, the Hittites, the Mycenaean Greeks and other civilizations in the area was considerably weakened, and the whole of the Mediterranean world entered a period of economic and political instability which will still last for hundreds of years. It is during this volatile period that many Phoenician cities began to develop into significant maritime powers, perhaps due to the power vacuum left by the decline of the major Mediterranean and Near Eastern cultures of the time. The ethnic makeup of the Sea Peoples has long been a matter for heated debate. Over the years, it has been believed by various researchers to have included Etruscans, Trojans, Sardinians, Philistines, Minoans from Crete, and of course, Atlanteans. In his 2008 book, Bronze Age Atlantis, the International Nautical Empire of the Sea Peoples, author Walter Backum posits a link between the Sea Peoples of the Eastern Mediterranean and the lost civilization of Atlantis. An advertisement for his book sums up his theory, stating, Walt Backum merits the Empire of Atlantis as having initiated the Bronze Age. He also sees Atlantis as being a cultural and trading bridge between the American continents and Europe. He identifies the Sea Peoples who attacked Egypt in the 1200 BCE as offshoots from the inhabitants of Atlantis. Although the title would seem to imply romantic fantasy, the book is a serious work about the confederation of two major peoples and their search for the metals that gave them almost complete control of the Bronze Age for 1,000 years. It rethinks the sensationalized and romanticized version of Plato's Atlantis, with proof after proof of the identities and commercial enterprises of those ancient master mariners. It clearly shows that the story as told by the Egyptian priest Solon, who brought it back to Greece, was derived from original records contained in ancient Egyptian temple inscriptions and papyrus texts. The book further identifies the most reasonable location of the capital city of Atlantis, the correct time and extent of its oceanic empire, and the reason for its collapse in 1200 BCE. Scholars of Eastern Mediterranean prehistory have been waiting with barely concealed excitement for 13 years for Backum's solid evidence for his extreme theories. He has yet to provide any. Although some researchers believe that the Sea Peoples were a real confederacy of seafaring raiders, many think that rather than being interpreted as one cultural group, the term is best understood as referring to a number of population movements by various groups around 1200 BC. In other words, they were a symptom of the collapse, not the cause. The origins and identity of these roving groups, however, is still obscure. However, a recent DNA study of ancient human remains from the city of Ashkelon on the coastal plain 12 miles or so north of Gaza, in what is now Israel, has provided some fascinating, significant results in terms of the identity of the Sea Peoples. The abstract of the article, which appeared in the journal Science Advances in July 2019, makes interesting reading. It says, the ancient Mediterranean port city of Ashkelon, identified as Philistine during the Iron Age, underwent a marked cultural change between the Late Bronze and the Early Iron Age. It has long been debated whether this change was driven by a substantial movement of people, possibly linked to a larger migration of the so-called Sea Peoples. Here we report genome-wide data of 10 Bronze and Iron Age individuals from Ashkelon. We find that the early Iron Age population was genetically distinct due to a European-related admixture. This genetic signal is no longer detectable in the later Iron Age population. Our results support that a migration event occurred during the Bronze to Iron Age transition in Ashkelon, but it did not leave a long-lasting genetic signature. Hopefully, this is just the first of many DNA studies of the ancient populations of the Eastern Mediterranean, which will soon shed some much-needed light on the mysterious sea peoples. The largest collection of 4 millennia of Egyptian culture is located in Turin, Italy, and the single most valuable document is the Turin King List, or Turin Royal Canon. It is a damaged papyrus that provides an overview of all the rulers of Egypt. Only Cairo, London, and Turin have major museums totally dedicated to ancient Egypt. For the grand collection in Turin, the credit belongs to diplomat and collector Bernardino Drovetti, 1776 to 1852, who had been appointed by Napoleon as a French consul in Egypt in 1802 and as consul general in 1821. For years, Drovetti strove to create his collection in Egypt in the 1820s, later to offer it to potential European buyers in an auction. The largest collection was purchased by the French government in 1823, and the collection ended up in Turin, then a part of France. With several further purchases of valuable Egyptian artifacts, Turin became a center for the remains of Egyptian culture, which were housed at the impressive Jesuit architectural complex downtown. Pyramid researcher Dr. Sam Osmanagic visited the Egyptian Museum in Turin a couple of times, 20 and 12 years ago. The focus of his visits had been on the largest collection of mummies in the world. However, his third visit was focused on the Turin King List. Drovetti obtained this papyrus, 1.7 meters long and 0.41 meters wide. In 1818 in Luxor, most likely from one of the tombs, packaged it and mailed it to Turin in 1820. During the transport, the papyrus was damaged and unfortunately 50% of the text was lost. The chronology of Egyptian rulers intrigued researchers throughout the world. There are several historical documents which allowed the compilation of this sequence. 9 documents stand out. Den's Seal, a pharaoh of the First Dynasty, listing all First Dynasty pharaohs from Narmer to himself. Palermo Stone, of the Fifth Dynasty, listing the former pharaohs of the 5 dynasties. However, the stone had been broken, so the list is incomplete. Giza King List, created during the 6th dynasty, selective. Karnak King List, 18th century, highly selective. Abydos King List, 19th century, missing the pharaohs of the first immediate period. Saqqara King List, missing the pharaohs of the First Dynasty. Manetho's List, Greek period, the original had been lost, translations have inaccurate editions. All of these lists are, however, deemed complementary relative to the most comprehensive and systematic Turin Royal List, compiled at the age of Pharaoh Ramesses II in the 19th dynasty, i.e. in the 13th century BC. Only this list in Turin contains the names of pharaohs and the years, often even months and days, when they reigned. Other lists may have been used for comparison and verification. For instance, some lists excluded and hated foreign rulers, Nubian, Libyan, Mesopotamian. Some others excluded the rulers of different religious persuasions, and so on. In this regard, the Turin list is objective and neutral. Presumably, when it had been undamaged, it included the names of 300 rulers. Sadly, both the beginning and the end of the list has been lost, and some names have been gravely damaged. The papyrus was divided into 11 columns. The first column lists the gods of ancient Egypt, the second, the demigods and mythical kings of ancient Egypt. The third column contains the sons of gods, dynasties 1 and 2. The fourth and subsequent ones list the sons of gods, dynasties 2 through to 5, i.e. mortal rulers. Now we come to the cause of Dr. Sam's interest in this document. The list of pharaohs had been compiled so the rulers could demonstrate and prove that they were direct descendants of gods and that their bloodline reached all the way back to Horus. Therefore, sons of gods or pharaohs were reincarnations of Horus on earth, and after death they were identified with Osiris. This list reaches back to the time when Egypt had been ruled by gods who came from the sky. At the end of the list, in its last 2 lines, as a summary of the entire document, it reads, Honorable Shamsi-Hor, year 13,420. The reign before Shamsi-Hor, 23,200 years. That's a total of 36,320 years. Although the bulk of the first and second column is missing, it's clear that it had contained a record of the first rulers of Egypt who reigned considerably longer than mortal humans. We could make a comparison with the Sumerian king list. In an age more than 30,000 years ago, Sumerian kings ruled on average for 1,000 years each. That had been without a doubt the case in Egypt as well. Certainly, in those times, Egypt looked different. Instead of the present-day desert, northern Africa had been green, with fertile soil and a pleasant climate. That was why the gods rightly selected Egypt as their home. Criticisms of some historians that the age of the gods ought to be discounted and the reign of Egypt's rulers should be counted only from the pharaoh, the first mortal, son of gods, Pharaoh's Menes, are biased and unscientific. If we accept that all mortal rulers, why would we reject immortal ones? Why have such selectivity in science? To take what suits us and what fits our view of the world, and to cast aside what clashes with our own ideas. The Turin king list clearly demonstrated that there had been 9 dynasties that correspond to the pre-dynastic period of the pharaohs. These include the rulers of Memphis, rulers of the north, and lastly Shamsu-Hor, Horus followers, who reigned over Egypt until Menes, the first mortal pharaoh of Egypt. According to Roman historian Eusebius of Caesarea, the dynasty of the gods reigned in Egypt for 13,900 years. The first god, Vulcan, who brought fire to humans, then Sosis, Isis, and Osiris, followed by Osiris's brother, Typhon, and ultimately Horus, son of Isis and Osiris. They had been succeeded by demigods who reigned for 11,025 years. This adds up to 24,925 years, around 3,000 years BC. The first human pharaohs took over as the rulers of Egypt. Manetho also mentioned the age of gods and demigods. He identified 4 dynasties that preceded Menes, 2 dynasties of gods, 1 of demigods, as well as 1 transitional dynasty. The first 2 dynasties included several crucial gods, Ptah, Ra, Shu, Geb, Osiris, Seth, and Horus, and they reigned over Egypt for a period of 12,300 years. They were succeeded by a 3rd dynasty led by Thoth, which numbered 12 divine pharaohs. They reigned for more than 1,500 years. These had to be supplanted by 30 demigods of the 4th dynasty, who had often been referred to as the followers of Horus. The hawk was their emblem, and they reigned for 6,000 years. After the reign of these otherworldly beings, chaos broke out in Egypt. Finally, Pharaoh Menes brought the order and united the lands of ancient Egypt. On the Turin papyrus, the first column lists the gods of an ancient land on the Nile River. The second column, in lines 1 to 10, lists demigods or spirits and mythical kings as described by some. It is to this section of the papyrus that Dr. Sam's eyes were drawn the most. These 2 columns had also been most gravely damaged. A couple of years ago, the museum announced that the damaged sections of the papyrus had been found and that their identification was underway. Let us hope that we'll get new confirmations about these most ancient times. Focus meditation by Dr. Sam on Turin King's list. A lower priest had written on this papyrus following the instruction of the supreme priest. They based it on all other documents. The gods actually existed, it had been a different age, they had flying craft, gods reigned over humans. Museum visitors brought Dr. Sam back to reality. Due to the sheer volume of artifacts on the museum's several levels, few set aside much time to focus on the Turin King list. Contemporary, unbiased researchers will come back to this list and forever shake Egyptologists' dogmas in the future. Egyptian history didn't start 5,000 years ago, but more than 36,000 years before the present.